Hello and welcome to H-Karts, coming to you from a petrol station just outside Huddersfield, and that's because we're on our way to Buckmore Park for round 1 of the BUKC. We're going on the Tuesday evening rather than the Wednesday morning because Jack Linus's parents live somewhere in Chelmsford and we want a good night's sleep before we get down to some action. So, this is the review of round 1 of the 2019 BUKC season from Buckmore Park, where Huddersfield experienced a bit of a mixed bag in terms of results. But let's quickly gloss over the car journey from West Yorkshire to Kent, which included a stopper for McDonald's, getting stuck behind a lorry carrying some straw, and Ollie Milner saying a quick hello to the viewers. Once we arrived at the circuit the following morning, we walked around the circuit to inspect how much morning dew had been left, and this caught out Alex Gunn. Shortly afterwards, we punished him by locking him in Jack Hodges' car boot. During the signing on process, Jack Linus was generous enough to give his breakfast to the floor, and Milner was still being his friendly self. The main championship took place on the 13th of February, and if you believe in all that superstitious bollocks, then some teams could blame their eventual results on the fact that the racing took place on the 13th. How unlucky were Huddersfield? Let's find out. Race 1 kicked off with A Team's Sam Tern starting 14th and B Team's Ollie Milner starting 8th. Oddly, both drivers were suffering from cramp in the middle finger, although Milner's occurred during the formation laps. It was the man with the golden Volvo who had a terrific start to be 4th by the end of the first lap, while the turntable made up 2 places from his starting position, determined of course by an algorithmic raffle. Both drivers were competitive throughout the race, but Tern had a bit of an edge over Milner and overtook him for 8th on lap 17. Hungry for more, he had a go at Oxford Brooks B, who wasn't really in a mood to let him through. Tern eventually had to settle for 8th, while Milner finished 9th, less than a second behind his teammate, but both were less than 11 seconds behind eventual race winner Exeter A, just to show how competitive the whole field was. Next up were Alex Gunn and Jack Hodges. Gunn had the distinct luxury of starting up in 5th place, while Hodges wasn't quite as fruitful, but still had the potential for a good result from 15th. For most of the race, Gunn battled with Edinburgh A's Max Shepherd, who himself was battling with an illness and therefore a special mention must be made to him for a gritty drive. 3 places higher up come the end of the race was the Shotgun, who finished some 20 seconds behind the flying Loughborough A. Meanwhile, Hodges had a somewhat challenging afternoon, slogging away in a densely packed midfield group, but he became the first Huddersfield driver to receive a penalty, an ABC. The new penalty system now docks positions rather than adds time. More on that later. The Jackhammer was eventually classified 26th, 4 places lower than his on-the-road position. Races 3 and 4 were completely irrelevant from a Huddersfield point of view, but both saw some interesting racing nonetheless. Race 4 even saw the first appearance of the safety cart, deployed after an enormous pile-up at the start of the second lap. See Swansea University Motorsports YouTube channel for more details. Race 5 saw both Huddersfield teams back in action after their break, with Stephen Letts starting 32nd for the A team and B team's James Brickles, who was making his mains debut from 22nd on the grid. Right from the off, Letts was flying, overtaking his teammate around the outside at the start of the second lap. While he was moving forwards, Brickles was also making progress. In the opposite direction. Some excuses he thought of was that this was his first time driving a go-kart with a Rotax engine, that this was his first time driving at Buckmore Park in the dry, and that this was his first time in the mains. Later inspection revealed that he actually had an underpowered go-kart. He is known as the choker, but in this case it applied to his engine. It was an unfortunate situation, but it meant that he finished 30th. Meanwhile, Letts had charged his way through 93.5% of those who started in front of him to finish 3rd, but an ABC penalty meant that any chance of victory was non-existent. He was eventually classified 7th. The final race of round 1 saw A Team's Jack Linus and B Team's Kesha Santoso take to the track. Linus was in top form during the qualifiers and was looking for another win, but he would have to work hard from 23rd on the grid. Santoso, also making her mains debut, had an even tougher task on her hands from 29th. Linus's race almost mirrored that of Hodges as he spent the entirety of it in a competitive traffic jam. The key difference was that the racing Linus accrued a total of no penalties, and he eventually finished 15th. Santoso, on the other hand, had picked up a penalty brand new to the world of the BUKC, speeding under yellows, possibly because a marshal had chosen the wrong moment to play a game of chicken with Quick Kes, but probably not. Her final result was 33rd. So the results of round 1 left Huddersfield A 5th overall behind Loughborough A, Exeter A, Southampton A and Coventry A, and the pleasant distinction of being the highest placed team from the north. Huddersfield B, on the other hand, had come 42nd overall, and were disappointed not to be the lowest placed team from the north. We're looking at you, Leeds. Round 2, and the 3-hour-long endurance races, which kicked off with Ollie Milner and Jack Hodges for the B team. First up was Milner, whose middle finger cramp had finally been sorted out. He took advantage of another high grid slot to briefly run 3rd before his first stop, which went alright. While Hodges waited his turn, Milner kept up a good pace during the middle part of the race to run 5th before handing over to the jackhammer. Just a quick shot of Kingston A playing dodgems with Newcastle B. For the final part of the race, Hodges battled with Coventry A, trading places in the dying laps before eventually coming out on top for what was eventually 6th place. The meet in round 2's 3-race sandwich featured the A team and the combination of Stephen Letts and Alex Gunn starting 24th. That was a combination that saw victory in the previous instalment of BUKC at Buckmore Park. Thanks to an electrifying pace and a quick first stop, Letts got the A team into a position to challenge for the win, but then at half distance he received an ABC penalty for this. Whichever way you look at it, it completely killed Huddersfield's race with absolutely no chance to offset the extremely soft misdemeanour, and why the new penalty system is shit. What should have been 3rd ended up being 7th for Letts and Gunn come the end of the race. The final race of the day saw both teams out on circuit, with the A team starting 13th and the B team starting 30th. After a disappointing outcome for the A team in the previous race, Santern was looking to get in amongst the action, but on lap 1, calamity. The impact was such that Tern was shown the mechanical flag on lap 4 and metaphorically ended their race. So hopes for a good result rested on James Brickles. Although this spin didn't exactly help, a consistent pace plus a good first pit stop put the choker in the mix with other drivers, and even attempted a lunge. Before handing over to Kesha Santoso for the final stint, Brickles had made his way back up to 19th, but things went wrong at the second stop as the kart refused to fire up. The culprit was a dead battery. But this wasn't an isolated problem, as most, if not all teams were affected by this. Fortunately, the B team weren't affected as much as some. See Swansea University Motorsports YouTube channel for more details. After a hasty repair job, Santoso brought the kart home in 25th, some 8 places higher than a rather deflated A team who had Jack Linus at the wheel at this point. So after an endurance round that can only be described as an unmitigated disaster, the A team were 30th overall, 7 places behind the B team. However, every team is allowed 2 dropped scores throughout the whole season, so providing things don't go tits up again, round 2 will definitely be one of the A team's dropped scores. For now though, they sit 16th in the championship, while the B team lie 27th. The following day saw many drivers ditch the commercially fuelled entity of Valentine's Day to take part in round 1 of the Intermediates Championship, where the C team were anxious to try their hand at the new Rotax-engined Club 100 Go-Karts. First out was Ben Tripp, who had to tackle some aggressive morning dew for the 20-minute combined practice and qualifying session. Although he had only qualified 33rd, he was much more comfortable on a dry track and made steady progress through the field. This included a splendid double overtake at Paddock Bend. By half distance he was up to 23rd, but unfortunately kart trouble forced him into the pits. The trip teaser eventually finished down in 34th, but at least he had fun. Next up for race 2 was Clio Cinardi, who under greasy conditions showed some very good speed in the early part of practice and qualifying. Although she ended up in 21st, a blistering start put her briefly in 10th during the first lap before settling in 12th for the early part of the race. Then the safety cart made an appearance and Clio lost a couple of positions. Under yellows, nothing wrong with that at all. Once the race resumed, Quick Clio battled amongst a condensed midfield pack and eventually finished in a very respectable 15th. Between races 2 and 3 was the Rookies race, where Huddersfield fielded a total of no drivers, which makes this next segment completely irrelevant. That's Nicky Richardson, one of the more impressive rookie drivers. Luke Bath was out for race 3, and his qualifying session was a particularly exciting one. The track was drying out and lap times were tumbling, but the Bath bomb was very quick throughout the 20 minutes and he had a shot at pole position, but traffic in the closing moments left him 9th on the grid. Although he didn't have the best of starts to the race, he was more than up for it, overtaking into Garda, and just to balance it out, overtaking coming out of Garda. During the race, Bath was biffed up the bottom by another rival going into the first hairpin, and for some reason that was Luke's fault, so 8th on the road became 12th come the end. Straight to the final race of the day, as no one from Huddersfield was taking part in race 4, and the final member of the C team was Zubin Motoshaw, taking part in his first ever BUKC race. The start was an exciting one as Sheffield Hallam A and Bath C exchanged phone numbers at Symes Sweep. Motoshaw had a steady one and was up to 28th from 34th on the grid, and testing the limits. Just a bit too far. Nevertheless, he continued on his way to 31st, but in terms of eligible drivers, he scored points for 24th, which was 7 more than Ben Tripp. So those results left the C team 25th overall out of 44 teams, and that marks the end of the Buckmore Park review. The next round will take place on the 5th and 6th of March at the Three Sisters circuit in Wigan for the first time in the BUKC's history. The chosen layout appears to be super fast, and the choker will be hoping not to get the kart he drove in his sprint race. H-Karts would like to thank all our sponsors, and stay tuned and see you soon.